The steam rises from the pot as I stir the sauce one last time. My heart pounds so hard I can feel it in my throat. From the dining room, laughter erupts, sharp and mean. Cole's voice cuts through the noise like a knife. Careful, guys. If you don't like the food, just pretend. My wife's sensitive about her experiments. More laughter follows. I freeze, the ladle trembling in my hand. My chest tightens. I force my face into a smile, the kind that doesn't reach my eyes. I pick up the dish, my hands shaking slightly as I walk toward the dining room. Every step feels heavier than the last. Cole sits at the head of the table, smirking, enjoying the moment he's created at my expense. The room starts to spin. My vision blurs at the edges. This is the moment my marriage ends. I just don't know it yet. I excuse myself to the kitchen, my voice barely steady. The moment the door swings closed behind me, my mask falls. Tears blur my reflection in the stove's glass. I grip the counter until my knuckles turn white, trying to breathe through the humiliation. My name is Olivia Hart. I'm 32 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon. That night, standing in my own kitchen, I realized something I'd been avoiding for months. I wasn't Cole's wife anymore. I was his punchline. His joke. His target. Every insult he threw at me in front of his friends landed harder because I'd spent so long pretending they didn't hurt. But they did. They cut deep. And tonight, something inside me finally broke. I wiped my eyes, straightened my shoulders, and made a decision. I was done being the butt of his jokes. 2 years earlier, everything was different. I stood in a bright co-working space in downtown Portland, laptop open, helping Cole pitch his startup idea to potential partners. He was charming, driven, and magnetic. The kind of person who made you believe anything was possible. I was a marketing consultant back then, making good money, building my own client base. But when Cole asked me to help him full-time, I said yes. I believed in him. I believed in us. He called me his secret weapon, the brains behind his brand. I quit my job to support his dream. My parents warned me. My friends raised eyebrows. But I was in love, and love made me stupid. Back then, Cole looked at me like I was the only person in the room. I didn't know that feeling would disappear so completely. Our tiny apartment smelled like burnt coffee and hope. We worked late into the night, brainstorming names, designing logos, building pitch decks side by side. Cole would joke about the mansion we'd live in one day. The vacations we'd take. The life we'd build together. I believed every word. When the first investor signed on, he swept me up in his arms and spun me around. Couldn't have done it without you, Liv, he said, his voice full of joy. I held on to that moment, replayed it in my mind during the hard days. I didn't know it would be the last time he'd mean those words. The last time he'd see me as a partner instead of a tool. Love doesn't prepare you for the moment it turns into something ugly. Success changed everything. Within 6 months, Cole moved his startup into a real office. He hired a team. He networked with investors and tech entrepreneurs. And slowly, he stopped saying we. It became I. He'd correct me in front of his staff, subtle at first, then more obvious. When I suggested a marketing angle, he'd dismiss it with a wave. When investors came for dinner, he'd joke about my cooking, calling my meals edible disasters. His new friends laughed every time. I told myself it was just stress, that building a company was hard, that marriages went through phases. But deep down, I felt myself shrinking. I measured my words. I cooked his favorite meals hoping for approval. I became smaller and smaller, while he grew louder and bolder. The first bruise wasn't physical. It was the night Cole joked about my weight in front of his coworkers. He said I should hit the gym if I wanted to keep up with his success. Everyone laughed. I forced a smile and excused myself to the bathroom. I cried silently, staring at my reflection, wondering when I'd become so invisible. Later, he apologized with a kiss and a pair of expensive earrings. You know I'm just teasing, babe, he said, pulling me close. But the bruise stayed, invisible and internal. It throbbed every time he made another joke, every time I saw that smirk. I started to believe the things he said about me. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I wasn't smart enough. Maybe I deserved the way he treated me. Cole's friends started coming over more often. Poker nights. Football games. Impromptu dinners. I became the hostess, the maid, the cook. I learned to smile through their jokes, to laugh when they laughed at me, to play the role of the perfect wife. Inside, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that made me who I was. But I told myself this was marriage, this was support, this was love. I ignored the tightness in my chest, the way my hands shook when I heard his car pull into the driveway. I told myself I was overthinking it. That if I just tried harder, cooked better, looked prettier, he'd go back to being the man I fell in love with. I was wrong. That night, after his friends left, I was cleaning up the kitchen when I heard voices from the patio. Cole and his best friend, Evan, were outside smoking cigars. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I just happened to be near the window. She's harmless, man, Cole said, his voice low and casual. Clueless. I could sign half the company in her name and she wouldn't even notice. Evan laughed. You're ruthless, dude. My heart dropped into my stomach. My hands froze on the dish I was washing. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. What did he mean? What had he signed in my name? I backed away from the window, my pulse racing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words over and over. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about what Cole said. Every form I'd signed for him, every document he'd rushed in front of me to save time, suddenly felt suspicious. He always said it was boring business stuff, nothing I needed to worry about. I'd trusted him. I'd believed he was protecting me from the stress of running a company. But now, doubt crept in like poison. What if he'd been using me? What if I was the fool he and Evan laughed about? I started paying closer attention. I watched him on his laptop, noticed the way he'd quickly close windows when I walked by. I saw the way he smiled at me now, like I was a pet, something harmless and easy to control. Something had to be done. A week later, I was balancing our household accounts when I found something strange. Bank transfers to an LLC I didn't recognize. The amounts were significant, tens of thousands of dollars. I clicked through the records, my stomach twisting. The company name stopped my breath, Hart & Company. My maiden name. I opened the registration documents. My signature was there, clear as day. But I never signed it. I never opened a company. My hands shook as I printed the papers. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. Cole had forged my signature and created a company in my name. But why? What was he hiding? I needed answers, but I couldn't let him know I'd found out. Not yet. I had to be smart. I called our accountant, pretending to be confused about some paperwork. His voice was friendly, unsuspecting. Oh, that's the consulting company Cole set up for you. He said you wanted to formalize your work with his startup. My throat tightened. Right. Of course. He continued, explaining how payments from Cole's company flowed through Hart & Company, how I was listed as the sole owner, and how all the tax liability fell on me. I felt sick. If anything went wrong, if Cole's company collapsed or got investigated, I'd be the one they'd come after. I'd be the scapegoat. He'd set me up perfectly. I thanked the accountant and hung up, my mind racing. Cole had been planning this for months, maybe longer. And I'd been too blind to see it. That night, I cooked Cole's favorite meal. Steak, roasted potatoes, garlic bread. I smiled. I laughed at his jokes. I played the role he expected. But inside, I was different. Something had shifted. I wasn't his victim anymore. I was collecting evidence. Over the next few days, I copied documents. I photographed receipts. I downloaded bank statements. I moved carefully, quietly, making sure he never suspected a thing. My silence became my weapon. Every time he mocked me, every time he made me feel small, I reminded myself that I was building a case. I was preparing for war. And when the time came, I'd strike so hard he wouldn't see it coming. For now, I just had to wait and play dumb. I reached out to Elise, an old colleague from my marketing days. She was now consulting for tech investors, the exact people Cole was courting. We met at a coffee shop across town, far from anywhere Cole might go. I showed her everything. The LLC, the transfers, the forged signatures. Her eyes widened. Olivia, this is fraud. Serious fraud. She helped me dig deeper, using her access to investor databases and financial records. What we found made my blood run cold. Cole had been embezzling money from his own company, funneling it through Hart and Company to hide it. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were missing. And every trail led back to me. He's been cooking the books, I whispered, while I've been cooking his dinners. Elise squeezed my hand. We're going to fix this. Weeks passed. I perfected my act. I was cheerful, helpful, and submissive. Everything Cole wanted me to be. He grew bolder, more careless. He bragged to his friends about upcoming deals. He drank more, slipped up more, revealed more. I listened to everything. One night, he announced plans for a massive investor dinner. He wanted to expand, to bring in more money, more partners. He'd use my fraudulent LLC to hide even more cash. That's when I knew it was time. I'd serve him the truth the way he'd served me humiliation. At his own table. In front of everyone who mattered. I'd dismantle him piece by piece, just like he'd done to me. But I'd do it better. Smarter. Final. Cole announced the new investor dinner with his usual arrogance. We're hosting it here, he said. Make it nice, Liv. These people are important. I smiled sweetly. Of course. I'll handle everything. He smirked. Trying to redeem your cooking? I laughed softly. Something like that. He had no idea. Over the next 2 weeks, I planned every detail. Not just the menu, but the guest list. I discreetly invited Elise, introducing her as a potential investor Cole hadn't met yet. I made sure his accountant would be there. His lawyer. His biggest investors. Every person who could expose him would be seated around my table. Cole thought he was expanding his empire. He was actually walking straight into his own trap. And I was the one setting it. I spent hours perfecting the dinner. I tested recipes, practiced presentations, and rehearsed my lines. I had to get this right. One mistake, one slip, and Cole would turn it around on me. But I wasn't the same woman he'd broken down over the past 2 years. I was sharper now. Focused. Angry in a way that made me clear-headed instead of emotional. Elise helped me organize the financial documents, printing them in a way that would be impossible to deny. Every transaction, every forged signature, every hidden transfer. We had it all. The plan was simple: expose him in front of everyone, leave him no room to lie, and walk away free while his world crumbled. The night before the dinner, I barely slept. But it wasn't fear keeping me awake. It was anticipation. The night arrived. I set the table with candles and fresh flowers. I wore a black dress, simple but elegant. Cole's investors started arriving at 7. I greeted each one with a warm smile, playing the perfect hostess. Elise arrived last, blending in seamlessly. Cole was in his element, shaking hands, pouring drinks, telling stories that made everyone laugh. I moved through the room with trays of appetizers, silent and efficient. Inside, my heart pounded like a war drum. The house smelled of roasted chicken and herbs. Jazz played softly in the background. Everything looked perfect. Cole caught my eye and winked, proud of the scene I'd created. He thought I was his decoration. He had no idea I was his executioner. I smiled back, sweet and deadly. Dinner began smoothly. Cole sat at the head of the table, holding court. He joked, he charmed, he dominated the conversation. And then, as always, he started in on me. "Let's hope she didn't poison us this time," he said, raising his glass. Everyone laughed. I smiled sweetly from the kitchen doorway. "Oh, don't worry," I said, my voice light and playful. "What I made tonight is unforgettable." More laughter. They had no idea what I meant. I served the main course, moving around the table with practiced grace. Cole was riding high, drunk on attention and wine. He didn't notice the way Elise watched him. He didn't see the accountant shifting uncomfortably. He was too busy enjoying himself. Too busy feeling untouchable. That was his mistake. Dessert arrived on small white plates. Chocolate soufflés, perfectly risen, dusted with powdered sugar. But tucked beneath each plate was something else. A folded piece of paper. The guests picked them up, curious. "What's this?" one investor asked. I stood at the end of the table, hands clasped in front of me. "Consider tonight's real menu," I said calmly. They unfolded the papers. Silence fell over the room like a blanket. Each sheet contained financial statements. Transaction records. Proof of embezzlement. Forged signatures. Every crime Cole had committed, laid out in black and white. The accountant's face went pale. The lawyer's jaw tightened. Elise leaned back, arms crossed, watching. Cole's face was drained of all color. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The room held its breath. This can't be," Cole stammered, his voice cracking. He looked around the table, searching for an ally. No one spoke. Elise slid a thick folder across the table toward him. "We traced every transaction, Cole," she said, her voice calm and professional. "Every dollar you stole. Every signature you forged. It all leads back to you." The lawyer stared at the documents, his expression hardening. The accountant pushed his chair back, clearly wanting to distance himself. Cole's biggest investor, a man named Richard, set down his glass. "You've been stealing from your own company?" His voice was ice. Cole tried to recover. "You don't understand. She's behind this." He pointed at me, his finger shaking. "She set this up." I met his eyes, my voice steady and cold. "Funny. Since you told Evan I was too dumb to notice anything." His own words. His downfall. The investors started asking questions, their voices overlapping. Cole lashed out, his panic rising. He shouted, he pointed, he tried to explain. But every word made it worse. The evidence was undeniable. He'd been caught, and there was no way out. Richard stood, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling the board. This dinner is over." Others followed. Chairs scraped. People filed out, shaking their heads, whispering to each other. Cole stood alone at the head of the table, his empire crumbling in real time. He looked at me, his face twisted with rage and desperation. "You ruined me," he hissed. I picked up my wine glass, took a slow sip, and met his gaze. "No, Cole. You did that yourself." He stormed out, slamming the. The next morning, Cole's phone exploded. Calls. Emails. Texts. His investors pulled their funding. The board froze his accounts and launched an internal investigation. Within 48 hours, his company was in freefall. Partners distanced themselves. Clients canceled contracts. Everything he'd built collapsed like a house of cards. And me? I was cleared. Publicly. Elise had made sure every document showed I was a victim, not an accomplice. My lawyer sent a statement to the press. The fraud investigation confirmed I'd been used. Cole tried to blame me, but no one believed him. His reputation was destroyed. Mine was salvaged. I filed for divorce the following week. I didn't ask for anything except my freedom. He didn't fight it. He couldn't. He had nothing left to fight with. I walked away clean. 3 months later, Cole showed up at my new apartment. I'd moved to a smaller place in a quieter neighborhood, far from the house we'd shared. He looked terrible. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, desperate. "You ruined me," he said again, his voice shaking. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "No, Cole. You did that yourself." He took a step forward. "I loved you." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "You used me. You humiliated me. You forged my name and set me up to take the fall for your crimes. That's not love." He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. "We're done. Don't contact me again." I closed the door in his face. Locked it. And exhaled. The silence that followed was the most powerful sound I'd ever heard. Final. Irreversible. Mine. 6 months after the dinner, I opened my own marketing consultancy. I partnered with small startups run by ethical founders, people who valued honesty and integrity. My firm grew quickly. Word spread. I was featured in a local business magazine. The headline read, "Former wife of disgraced CEO launches empowerment agency for women in business." I smiled when I saw it. Not because of revenge, but because I'd reclaimed myself. My confidence returned. My voice grew stronger. I hired a small team of women who'd also been underestimated, overlooked, dismissed. We built something real together. Something that wasn't based on lies or fraud. Cole's downfall became my rise. And I didn't feel guilty about it. Not even a little. Justice had been served. And it tasted better than anything I'd ever cooked. Today, I'm standing in my office kitchen, stirring a pot of soup for my team. They're gathered around the table, laughing, sharing stories about their weekends. The room smells like garlic and thyme. Sunlight streams through the windows. I look at the pot and think about that night, the dinner that changed everything. Cooking was never about the recipe. It was about timing. Knowing when to stir, when to add heat, when to let things simmer, and when to serve. I finally got the timing right. I turn off the burner, wipe my hands on a towel, and join my team at the table. We eat together, talk about upcoming projects, and celebrate small wins. This is what partnership looks like. What respect feels like. I don't miss Cole. I don't miss that life. I miss who I was before him, but I'm grateful for who I became after. Stronger. Wiser. Free.